This week's film is a neo-noir rock and roll musical fable, so yeah, let's take a look back at Streets of Fire, where Willem DaFoe plays a 50s biker gang greaser in a mashup with 50s noir and 80s neon sensibilities and style, where diegetic needle drops happen every 10 minutes, and it is just as glorious as that sounds. Before I get ahead of myself though, let's, as always, start at the very beginning. Streets of Fire is a 1984 neo-noir rock opera directed by Walter Hill and co-written by Hill and Larry Gross. The genesis of the picture came during the making of 48 Hours, when Hill, Gross and producers Lawrence Gordon and Joel Silver all worked together on that film, with Paramount being hugely impressed with their work. They decided to strike while the iron was hot and put together another script to sell to Paramount, with Hill having a desire to create a comic book style movie that had all of the elements he thought the perfect film would possess when he was a teenager, saying, "Things that I thought were great then and which I still have great affection for: custom cars, kissing in the rain, neon, trains in the night, high-speed pursuit, rumbles, rock stars, motorcycles, jokes in tough situations, leather jackets and questions of honour." Seeing as he didn't like any of the comic books he had ever read, he decided to create a wholly new character for the script using these elements, so that the film felt like a comic book movie without actually having a comic book as the source material, with this being intended to set up a series of adventures featuring protagonist Tom Cody, which never happened for reasons that will become clear by the end of this review. After the script was written, they sent it to Paramount, but due to some behind the scenes shenanigans, Hill's agent and Gordon, one of the producers, had fallen out with Michael Eisner, head of production at Paramount, so he rejected it on the grounds it was too close to Indiana Jones. I just want to add, has Michael Eisner ever seen Indiana Jones? Luckily for us, Bob Rame at Universal had tasted and greenlit the picture in under 3 days. Much of the film was shot on the Universal backlot, with a recreation of Chicago's elevated train line being built, and a tarp that measured 1,240 feet long and 220 feet wide and cost a staggering $1.2 million to construct, also being used so that they could film night scenes in the day. However, this caused its own numerous problems, with the noise of it flapping in the wind causing disruption to actors' dialogue being audible, and birds nesting in it doing what nesting birds do. Yeah, poop and noise were an issue. Sadly, because I would have loved this to have spawned that franchise, this genre and era melding rock opera was a financial and critical disappointment, only earning back $8.1 million on a budget of $14 million, currently holding a 69% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with the consensus being that Streets of Fire may sometimes buckle under the strain of its ambitious fusion of disparate genres, but Walter Hill's bravura style gives this motorcycle musical fuel to burn. As for me, I have seen this several times and I'm never disappointed on any rewatch. It promises a rock and roll fable in its advertising and the movie's opening, and my god, it does not disappoint with the style, narrative and soundtrack working wonderfully together to create a world you can't help but get sucked into. It has great style, being a meld of 50s noir and 80s neon, with the full-scale sets they built bringing this neo-noir past-future world Hill had imagined to glorious life. You have 50s greasers next to 80s neon-clad buildings and plaid suit-wearing characters all in the same scene. It is a beautiful visual kaleidoscope of colours, styles and themes, all topped off with the 3 types of transport in this world being 50s cars, big motorbikes and dark and moody subways. The story is a simple one in essence, being a love story of sorts that is designed to set up the character of Tom Cody, the people in his life and this world he inhabits, which it achieves with aplomb. starting with a 7-minute long diegetic musical number as Willem DaFoe and his gang of bikers menacingly riding into town being juxtaposed against Diane Lane's onstage performance, with the editing being all quick cuts back and forth between various characters and somewhat in time with the beat, setting up exactly what we are going to get here. So it's no surprise when the song ends and DaFoe's character Raven kidnaps Lane's Ellen Aim, with the first of many decent action set pieces as they make their getaway following on from that. The action here isn't particularly over the top, but suits the movie it is in, adding to the overall general fun and feel of the world, with nobody, as far as I know, actually dying on screen. With this being a PG rated film, it was originally an R then cut down to be a PG, even though you totally see a lady's nipples. The 80s was a totally different time, I guess. We are then introduced to our protagonist Tom Cody, played by Michael Pear, and the rest of the story is a pretty straightforward one, with Cody rescuing Aim, facing down Raven, defeating him and driving off into the sunset, having a very similar ending to Casablanca, weirdly enough, with the gal leaving with the man who can help her, but she doesn't love and the man she loves walking off into the sunset with his friend, or driving off in this case. It's a simple and entertaining enough yarn that doesn't have a great deal of depth, but is nonetheless entirely entertaining when added to the world and style the filmmakers have built through the sets and cinematography. The soundtrack is pretty awesome, being a mash of 50s barbershop, doo-wop and 80s power ballads, with almost all the songs being diegetic. In other words, they happen in the world of the film. The people in the scene can hear them, as opposed to your usual non-diegetic soundtracks that are only audible to us, the audience. With the film opening and closing with Diane Lane performing on stage and several other musical stage performances popping up throughout the runtime. I think between this and Radioactive Dreams, diegetic onstage needle drops are a burgeoning cult movie love of mine. The cast, who were all young up-and-coming stars at the time, are largely great, with DaFoe being the standout along with Bill Paxman and Rick Moranis. But I hate to say this is also where the film's biggest and only problem lies. Whilst watching these cult larger budget films that are rightly held in such regard, but flopped on release either critically, commercially or both, I like to try and work out in my mind why, and this week it has never been more obvious. Diane Lane, who rather unfortunately had her big Hollywood breaks in 2 films that flopped, with this and The Cotton Club, resulting in her career stalling, is an excellent actress and in later years gained an Oscar nomination. She probably deserved much better than to be put into a love story across from Michael Pear, because good God, he's an absolute charisma vacuum, who probably couldn't act his way out of a wet paper bag. About 90% of his lines seriously feel like he's reading them off cue cards just off to the side of the shot, in a film that just oozes charm, style and charisma from every single frame. At its centre is a performance by a protagonist so wooden that the whole way through I was thinking to myself, has the same dead-eyed, emotionless tone that the very worst Sly Stallone acting masterclass could cook up. I'll be honest, that's probably being unfair to Sly Stallone. The character is written as a charismatic all-action hero, but Michael Pear is just horribly miscast, seemingly being incapable of portraying a tenth of that. As a result, the love story at the centre of the narrative just falls as flat as a pancake, and I can see why critical reception was kind of mixed due to that. Originally they actually wanted Tom Cruise, but he had already accepted a different role, so turned them down. Patrick Swayze and Eric Roberts were also in contention, and any of those would have instantly made this great film as it stands into one that so many more people would remember with great fondness, and kicked off that series of Tom Cody adventures. So that was Streets of Fire. almost the perfect genre melding mashup neo-noir rock and roll fable. If it wasn't for that one piece of poor casting, it would be, I'm sure, one of the more fondly remembered 80s franchises. Even now, I absolutely implore you to track it down and watch it, because there is so much here to love that adds up to something that is incredibly unique, fun, and well worth your time watching. Like, comment and subscribe, because next week it is one of my favourites that I mentioned a few weeks ago in the Reanimator review, and a reviewer requested I cover it with a full review. It's Society, which apparently we live in.